So recently I've had a few different recording sessions in the studio, and what I've noticed is that often in studio recording sessions or production sessions, you need various types of gear that maybe isn't so cool or sexy, like mic pre's and outboard gear like compressors, microphones, and all that awesome gear that we know and talk about. So today's video is talking about all of the unsexy things that are just as important, if not more important, to your recording and studio sessions. So the first thing that you're going to want to have easy access to is some spare cables. And by spare cables, obviously I mean microphone XLR cables, instrument leads, also things like patch cables, maybe some RCA cables for people to plug their phones into devices, and even some guitar pedal link cables are a good thing to have on hand as well. And that's because there are so many times where XLR cables fail, or a guitar lead fails, or someone forgets their instrument lead or patch cables, and you just need to keep the session going. Another thing that is super important to have in a studio session are adapters. Now, I have all different types of adapters, things like microphone stand adapters for different mic clips, but then also electrical adapters like headphone adapters from 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch, RCA adapters to 1/4 inch, I have gender bender adapters to swap mic cables from male to female, and even joining adapters for joining and running longer leads can sometimes be a useful thing. And you also should definitely have an iPhone adapter for audio as well, because very often in the studio you'll have someone that wants to play a song, and that artist might want to play that song through your system. So then you'll want like an RCA to 1/8 inch adapter with then an iPhone adapter to that. So then they can play their music through your system. Another extremely important thing that gets often forgot about is batteries. I can't count how many times I've had an artist say, hey, have you got some 9-volt batteries? Or have you got some AA batteries that I need for this device? I always have some 9 volts and AA's and AAA's and even those watch type batteries on hand, because you never know if someone's tuner's going to go down, or their pedals, or an acoustic guitar. And if you're the person that has these bits of gear on hand for the artist, they are going to appreciate you so much for saving the day. On that, having a spare guitar tuner for your artists, even just one of those clip tuners, is not a bad thing. I have both clip tuners and pedal tuners here in the studio, ready to go for when any artist needs to tune their guitars or ukuleles or bass or whatever. It also might be worth having things like guitar strings. I have electric guitar strings, acoustic guitar strings, and usually some bass strings on hand at all times, because you never know when someone's strings are gonna break during a recording session. It's gonna happen, and once again, if you have spare strings on you to save those artists in that moment, you look professional. And it doesn't matter which gauges you have, typically, because at the end of the day, you can swap different gauges to different strings here and there, so you should be fine with just 1 or 2 packets of gauge strings. And staying on guitarists for a second, the other thing you'll definitely want to have is some guitar picks. I prefer 7mm picks. I think they're a happy medium for most guitarists. You could have a variety of picks if you want, but I just keep 7mm here. They usually get me out of trouble. Now moving on to drummers, you're definitely going to want to have a drum key. It is very possible that a drummer is going to come in with their drums either out of tune, or maybe they'll need help tuning a kit, and you should always have a drum key available to help them tune their kit if necessary. Now don't get me wrong, I've worked with plenty of drummers who are more than capable at tuning their own kits, and that's always a bonus, but there are times where you may need to have a drum key. The other thing for drums that is super handy to have around in the studio are moon gels. Now, if you're not familiar with moon gels, they're kind of like that sticky hand, like if anyone knows those toys, the sticky hands, they're that kind of sticky gel material, and we use them on drums to help control the tone and the ring of a drum. So if you want a deader sounding drum or a tighter sounding drum that has less ring or resonance to it, the moon gels can be very, very useful for taming the tonality of a drum and helping remove certain ringing frequencies on a snare drum, for instance. And they're much better than using things like gaff tape on drums, if anyone anyone's seen that before, because gaff tape can actually ruin the drum heads, and moon gels are kind of damage free. They're awesome. And if you really want to splurge, you can also invest in tone control rings. These plastic tone control rings you might see on drums every now and then, they do a similar job and really tighten and deaden up the sound of a drum if that's what you're going for. You will 100% also want to have tape, all kinds of tape. Electrician's tape, or as we call it here in Australia, lecky tape. You'll also want some good quality gaff tape. We have a saying in the audio industry, gaff tape holds the world together, and you know, it's a motto to live by. If you ever get stuck with a broken mic stand or anything that might be broken or rattling or needs to be held together, gaff tape will save you in a pinch. It's an amazing thing to have on hand. And the reason why you will want electrician's tape, especially some white electrician's tape, is for writing and labeling cables, or labeling on a console strip or on bits of gear and outboard, to know where you're patching things and where things are lining up on the console. And you'll want to stay away from things like masking tape for this. I've seen heaps of people use masking tape to write on their consoles. The problem with masking tape is that it actually, over time, starts to bond to the surface it's on, and it becomes very, very hard to remove, whereas electrician's tape is always easy to remove from any surface. So stay away from masking tape. It's not the best thing to use in most situations. Use electrician's tape. Now, if you're writing on stuff, you'll also want some markers, Sharpies, lots of Sharpies. Different colored Sharpies, whatever colors you want, whatever colors you prefer, just get some Sharpies. You'll need to write and label things like your mic leads, things like the console channel strip or the preamps that you're running into. It always comes in handy in a pinch. One thing I forgot to mention with guitarists, you'll also probably want a capo. A capo is a really handy device to have in songwriting sessions as well as recording sessions. And if you've worked with a lot of acoustic singer-songwriters, or folk musicians, or different sorts of genres, you'll definitely have come across a session where you need a capo. And once again, it's just one of those easy things to have on hand if an artist forgets theirs, and will save you in a pinch. Now, the last kind of tools that you'll definitely want to have on hand are things like, number one, pliers. Some needle nose pliers can always be handy if you need to fix or repair things. Some heavy duty pliers are good for those aforementioned mic stand adapters. They can be really tricky, and a really heavy duty pair of pliers can actually be really useful in that situation. So I always have a pair of those on hand. Some small Phillips head and flathead screwdrivers are really handy if you need to quickly fix someone's guitar input, or sometimes when you're needing to replace batteries in active pickups. There are heaps of different situations where you just might need a screwdriver to quickly repair or maintain something in a session. Now, that's all the kind of tools and little bits and pieces that you might need for a session. However, there are some even more often forgot about things that you'll want in your session, especially for your artists. What I'm talking about here are comforts, things that will make your artists and yourself comfortable during a session. Now, the number one thing you'll want for an artist, especially in a long session, if they're attending recording and mixing sessions, is a really comfortable couch, because you want your artist to come in and feel comfortable in lots of different ways. They need to be comfortable while they're performing, but they also need to be comfortable while they're just chilling out and hanging out while you're working on their session. You also might want to invest in some air conditioning. I live in Australia. It is the middle of summer right now, and it gets bloody hot here. It gets extremely hot. So you need to have aircon, because what also gets really warm is all this crazy gear. Consoles, outboard pre's and compressors and all that add to the heat. And then on top of that, every single person you add to a room also adds to the temperature of that room. So it can get really hot if you have 2, 3, 4 people sitting in a room all at once. So you're definitely going to need something to cool down the room, and a split system is fine. Some people have those portable air conditioners, but they can be extremely noisy. I know I've used them before, and I'm lucky enough in my studio to just have some really good ducted air. Ducted air is going to be quieter, easier, and more efficient during your sessions. Now, one of the most important things I think to have in a session is water. Keeping your artist hydrated, especially if you're doing vocal work. Your artist will probably need to drink lots of water during the session, so having water on hand is a really important thing. Now, I just have standard bottled water. available in a fridge waiting for them. And I'll make sure that they know they can help themselves and grab whatever they want, because I just want the studio session to flow. They can grab as much bloody water as they want, and it doesn't cost much, and it's a really easy comfort for your artist, so they don't have to keep leaving the studio, filling up a bottle and coming back in. They can just grab a bottle, rehydrate, keep recording. On that, having a fridge is also a useful thing for them to bring their own food. If you've done long sessions with artists, especially multiple days in a row, it might seem fun at first to go to the local takeaway shop or go somewhere to get some nice food, but 2 or 3 days in a row of McDonald's or fast food or whatever, no one's going to be feeling 100%. And I actually like to stay completely away from takeaway and junk food in sessions. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against eating takeaway and fast food. I love it when I can eat it. However, what I find eating fast food does for a session is that people will get that immense sugar high and they eat all that fatty food, and then we all know how we feel 10, 20 minutes after eating that kind of food. We start to feel a bit sluggish, a bit tired, a bit sleepy. It's probably one of the things that can kill a session more than you realize. It can make the whole session become a bit unproductive. So I might get some fresh rolls or some fresh bread and some meats and salad, and I'll have that for lunch if artists want to join me. Sometimes we all hang out and eat lunch together, or as I said, they can bring their own food and put it in the fridge and have somewhere safe to keep their food. And that can be super useful, especially if they have special dietary needs. They can bring their own food comfortably and not have to worry about what they're going to eat for the day. The last comfort, and this is a huge one for me, is having coffee and tea available. I need coffee. I need at least a couple of coffees every day. It's about almost 3 o'clock right now. I haven't had my 2 o'clock coffee, and if anyone knows me, Mitch needs his 2 o'clock coffee. So, but yeah, you need to have these kind of things like water. Coffee and tea are also a useful thing to have. Certain singers might have their own kind of tinctures and teas that they like to drink. Some singers like to steer completely away from caffeine during their vocal tracking, and I understand that as well. But either way, you need to have these basic amenities available to your artist. It's a really important comfort thing to have coffee and tea if someone needs it, so make sure you have that as well. Oh, and last thing, a clean bathroom. Clean your bathrooms. Make sure your bathrooms are clean for your artists. No one likes a filthy bathroom. So that's it for this video. Let me know in the comment sections if you think there's something that I missed that is ultra important to a studio session. And do you agree? Were all of these things important? Were some of them not important to you? Let me know. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe down below. I'm Mitch from the DIYRecordingstudio.com. I'll catch you soon.